Слава Україні!
Hello everyone, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that you all are having a great day. I hope that you are having, a wonderful start to your Monday. I know it's the worst day of the week for me, and there's a lot going on for me today at work, but there's also been a lot today in the news. There's a ton of stuff in the news today, especially regarding Russia, because today is the big day that everyone has been worried about and has been waiting for. It is May the 9th. It is the 75th day of the war in Ukraine, and it is Victory Day for Russia. And that is kind of going to be the theme of the night, kind of what's happening majorly around the world. And really, all things considered, it was a little bit kind of disappointing, even for everybody. It didn't turn out to be as big as what everyone had thought it would be. And so we'll get to that here in a little bit. But I hope that you're safe. I hope that your family and friends are safe. If they're not, I hope they're able to get to a safe place. And we can help them do so, as well as millions of other people around the world, because we're the news that gives back. If you check out in the video description, you'll find that there are a ton of links to help with different fundraisers for different places around the world, not just Ukraine, though of course that is a big chunk of it, but also the millions of other people in places such as Ethiopia, Somalia, and Southeast Asia, which are, these regions still have crises going on. They still need your help, and there are millions of people there, just as much as there are millions of people inside of Ukraine that could use your help as well. So if you can't give a lot, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, like and subscribe to the video, because it helps us reach more people, and that means more people to come in, get good news, get good independent news, and then also, of course, more importantly, donate to places around the world and help people. And once we get large enough, those fundraisers will actually just be on the stream. They won't. We won't just have to put them in the description. They are also listed on our Discord. So if you guys want to check that out, the link's also in the description. And with that, we're going to go ahead and dive right into the news. So in Ukraine, there's a couple of different developments. First of all, Ukraine has completed the second part of that EU questionnaire. So that questionnaire, it's not just like a sheet of paper. It is a giant stack of books. A giant stack of legal books. It's not your, it's not like you're about to take a test and see what profession fits best for you. No, this is a huge monumental task, and it has to be done in chunks. I couldn't sit there and read this all. First of all, legal stuff is really boring to read for anyone who's had to. But Ursula von der Leyen has already announced that the decision on the status of Kyiv will only be made in June. And at the same time, President Macron said that the process of Ukraine's accession to the European Union could take several years or even decades, though we do know that that is attempted to be fast-tracked right now. And so everyone's expecting to be receiving a positive verdict regarding this, but they are going to be handing that over today, or they handed that over today. And we do have this directly from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And as you can see here, that's part 1 and 2, and they have all of this. That is a ton of work, and I really do not envy anyone having to read through all of that, because I cannot imagine probably a much more dull read, but an important one nonetheless, because this could change the future of Ukraine and its relationship with the rest of Europe for decades, or however really long the EU lasts and the relationship remains good. That completely changes economic ties between Ukraine and the rest of Europe, and it draws them closer towards the West and further away from that sphere of influence. Much like how Putin was afraid of NATO expansion, the EU expanding is similarly not a good thing. It detracts from Russia's ability to have a sphere of influence around itself, and the kind of that border area, that little buffer zone, such as what they have with Belarus, between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. In Sumy, today we actually have some news, and that's because a Jewish cemetery was hit in Sumy. So this is just something that occurred a part of more bombardments. These bombardments continue to occur nationwide, not just in the eastern part, such as in the Donbass, but also in other parts of the country. We've seen Lviv hit. We've seen different areas such as Kyiv hit. In fact, Antonio Gutierrez, who's the Secretary General of the UN, was in Kyiv when it was under missile strikes. So it's Russia's not shying away from any targets, and we can see that here. So pretty devastating. I mean, these people can't even have their own cemeteries. They even can't. Not even going to grieve for the loved ones you've already lost is not good enough. I mean, you can't even do that. They're target. This isn't the first time they've hit we saw them hit one in Mykolaiv as well, not too long ago. So they'll hit anything and everything. We've even seen them hit children's amusement parks here in Kharkiv. And as we move further south, though, the information becomes a little bit more uplifting, and that's because a pontoon bridge was destroyed near Belohorivka. And so this is a pontoon bridge that Russian forces were put across, and they attempted to cross early this morning with different tanks that they had in order to get across this Seversky Donets River, which runs right along here. This is kind of their border right now. This is really what's stopping them. And unlike the ADMIRAL River, this is something that is going to be a little bit more easy for them to bridge across and put in those pontoon bridges. But they couldn't outflank. What they're really trying to do is they're trying to outflank and outmaneuver, and that's going to cut off the Ukrainian forces fighting in Rubizhne and Severodonetsk. If they can't do that, then it's going to be a long, drawn-out fight, because there are plenty of Ukrainian defenses in and around the city of Severodonetsk, and we know the fighting is very bitter up in Rubizhne. So Rubizhne has not officially fallen to Russian forces yet. That is still not enough information to say it has officially fallen. Well, we can take a look here. They apparently hit it as they were trying to cross. A tank apparently went into the water, and the crews had to attempt to escape. So did not go very well for them at all. Along other fronts here, we can see that in celebration of May the 9th, Ukraine decided to send a very special gift to a Russian tank crew in light of Victory Day. And so we can take a look at that here. You can see this tank's actually up and running. You can see the heat signature coming off of that. And they're hovering over it with this drone, and this is a quadcopter, and there goes the munition and a direct hit. So, special gift for the Russians from Ukraine. But as we drop down into Mariupol here, we start to see some of that Victory Day theme come out. And this is something that has started to be reported. This is something that we started off with just hearing hearsay about it. Became more and more and more confirmed. And that is because Russian troops held a parade in Mariupol in celebration of May the 9th, of Victory Day. And they carried around, I think it's a 75-meter long ribbon of I think it's ribbon of St. George. That black and orange ribbon that you see everyone wearing. Here it is for you. So this is from TASS. So in the destroyed city of Mariupol, where there aren't all that many people exactly left, you can see, keep in mind, the fighting in the Azovstal still continues. But in the midst of the fighting, any Russian supporters, whoever they may have forced to do this, we don't know, are having celebrations in Mariupol. They're holding celebrations. Sorry. Reportedly, it's a 300-meter long ribbon of St. George. So, even more ridiculous. And so the city hasn't fallen completely yet. At all. And they're parading around as if it has. You can see here. Ah, yes. The Soviet flags. We can't forget the Soviet Union only collapsed 30 years ago, and yet it seems that the nostalgia continues. Whether willfully or not, we don't know. But the nostalgia continues. The hammer and sickle once again flies across Europe, and not in just a we're remembering the past kind of way. We've seen it on Russian tanks. We've seen it carried by the Russians. We've seen it flown over occupied cities well before Victory Day. In Hadar, we aired that here, flying the hammer and sickle. I mean, what else? What else could you say? Once again, if you're trying to not look like the bad guy, which is what Russia has repeatedly said repeatedly showed they're trying not to do, they're doing a very terrible job of it. Very terrible job of it, because everyone for like 70 years was afraid of the Reds taking over everything. So flying your hammer and sickle while invading a country is probably not the thing to do if you don't want to look like the bad guy. Once again, we continue here. Take a look at this. Meanwhile, as they're parading through the streets, here's their view. This is a city that went from being a beautiful cultural city, a metropolitan center, a blend of Russian and Ukrainian cultures, and just Eastern European cultures. I mean, a beautiful city on the Black Sea, prosperous port city, beautiful architecture and floral gardens and parks, and now it is essentially a ruined cemetery filled with nothing but rubble, soot, and ash. This is what they're parading about. And despite what Russia is claiming, you don't really capture a city that you completely destroy, because there's not a whole lot to capture, as we can see. I mean, it's burned out, bombed out. 25,000 estimated people have been killed. And that number we may never be able to verify, because we're pretty sure Russia's attempting to cover it up. We aired videos about the mass graves yesterday. In fact, from one of the people at the mass grave. And the amount of, not just the graves, but the body bags waiting to just be buried is insane. The mobile crematoriums are reportedly not working in the city because there's no... When they bombed the city, they cut off all of those gas lines that are needed to run those crematoriums. But while there may be a 300-meter ribbon, there aren't any armored vehicles, and that's because they're all still trying to take the Azovstal Steelworks. And they attempted again today. They attempted to go through a bridge, which is a break. They attempted, basically, this is kind of one of the rear areas. They didn't succeed. They attempted. It did not work. So even as they're holding these celebrations in Mariupol, the fighting continues. The bombardments continue. Those rocket strikes continue. So it's not exactly going all to plan. In fact, Mariupol was supposed to have fallen by now. It should have been something that Putin could have claimed in his speech as a victory. Look at this victory we have. Then again, it's even questionable if he would have, considering there isn't much of the city left to claim any victory over. And as we see this today on the 75th day of fighting, the Ukrainian flag still flies high over the Azovstal. Tattered and torn, but flying still proudly in the wind. This isn't the only place that they held these celebrations. We can also see just a little bit further south of Mariupol, here in Melikin, they also held May 9th celebrations as well. Once again, this is a Russian-occupied territory. But that's fine, because Ukraine held some Victory Day parades as well. as we can see here. Because not only are the Russians parading around their tanks, the Ukrainians are parading around the Russian tanks as well. And yet another MTLB donated to what is quickly becoming the most armored military force in the world, the Ukrainian farmers. Odessa, unfortunately, however, was hit once again with cruise missile strikes today, and reportedly there are 7 in total thus far, and one at least hit a shopping mall, which killed 1 civilian and wounded an additional 5. This is several days worth of bombardments against Odessa. We saw them hit the port yesterday. We saw them hit different areas of Odessa the day prior, including what appeared to be some civilian locations. And we continue to see them hit residential areas again today. So we can take a look here. I mean, immense fires currently ongoing, but those first responders, those Ukrainian first responders, are still doing everything they can to fight the blazes.
Коля, быстро отошел.
Ой-ой-ой, сейчас будет волна.
And so, as you can see, the strikes continue. However, despite reports from multiple sources, including mainstream media sources, including other news channels on YouTube as well, there have been a lot of people talking about the Admiral Makarov, which was reportedly hit by a Neptune cruise or anti-ship missile in the Black Sea. Reportedly was on fire, damaged. A bunch of ambulances reportedly raced to the hospital, over 300 of them. This appears not to be true whatsoever. So we even said this may have happened, but we never put it on the stream because there wasn't enough conclusive evidence. It was all hearsay. It was all rumors. We said this may have happened. We were one of the first people to say that this may have happened. But we did not believe that there was enough evidence for us to even say that. And we want to be able to show evidence when we're talking about a situation. We want to be able to give you the facts, and we correct whenever we're wrong, whenever possible. But it appears today that there's an independent reporter, in fact, that covers specifically naval warfare and naval maritime engagements. And today, in fact, satellite imagery showed not just the Admiral Makarov, what appears to be the Admiral Makarov, steaming out off the coast of Sevastopol, well underway with no visible damage or signs of engagement, but also 13 or more additional ships off the coast. And we actually have that here. His name is H.I. Sutton. He's an independent reporter. He's also been verified with other mainstream media sources. We got his Twitter here where he's reporting this stuff. And you can see here the different locations of ship locations here spotted. This came out at 8:57 UTC. I do not remember off the top of my head which time zone UTC is. But this is from this morning. So once again, what appears to be up here, the Admiral Makarov down just off the coast of Sevastopol with the majority of the Black Sea Fleet which has been anchored and moored in Sevastopol over the last few weeks at this point, since the sinking of the Moskva, really. They've been operating with outside of 30 miles, from my understanding, off the coast, just because of the threat of anti-ship missiles. There's also some additional landing craft headed over to Snake Island. I'm sure some Bayraktars will give them a nice welcome. But we can conclusively say, with enough evidence here today, including live satellite footage, that the Admiral Makarov appears to be just fine. There is no apparent engagement that occurred. There was no being hit with an anti-ship missile, regardless of the reports that have been stating otherwise. I know that that is something that has been brought up and has been rather major news, like, oh, they sunk another warship. No, they've sunk several smaller ships, some landing craft off of Snake Island, but no other major warships since the Moskva. And that concludes everything inside of Ukraine, but there is plenty outside. And that is honestly what we kind of are looking for today, is not what's going on in Ukraine, but in other parts of Europe, mainly Russia. And there is a lot going on in Russia. So we're actually going to wait and get to Moscow last. We're going to hop around the country a little bit here. And so we see here in Samara that they're busting out everything. They're busting out antiques for this parade. Take a look at this. I don't even know what model of tank that is. I was sitting here like, please let it be a T-26. Because T-26 is what got put into service at the very beginning of the war. I mean, it wasn't... It had essentially no armor and a 37mm main gun. No, this is even earlier. This is something from like World War One. It's even got the... it's got everything on it. Even has the ribbon of St. George. Of course, they're busting in all trucks. They're painting Z's all over it. Hammer and sickle once again, flying all around. And once again, here in Yekaterinburg. And so we can take a look at this. So I want to ask a very simple question of anyone in the audience, and that would be, what do these uniforms remind you of?
Вооруженных конфликтах. Вот и сейчас воины-уральцы с честью выполняют свой долг в ходе специальной военной операции. Музыкальное обеспечение вооруженных конфликтов.
Because that sure looks like stormtroopers to me. But that's not the only idiot thing they did. Weapon safety rules. Treat every weapon as if it were loaded. Never point your weapon at anything you do not intend to shoot. Keep your fingers straight and off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Keep your weapon on safe until you intend to fire. Know your target, what lies beyond and in between. Those are the weapon safety rules for anybody who's ever trained in any kind of, with any kind of firearms. Like, that's just the basics. Like, you don't get to shoot a firearm if you don't know those things. Meanwhile, for parades in Russia...
Красное знамя, являющееся сегодня знамением победы. Война была закончена. Фашистская Германия была разгромлена. Но...
Let's point all of our AKs at the crowd. God. And then in Tumen, here, we can see that they're also there celebrating. These guys are carrying... It's May, and these guys are carrying all of their winter snow gear. That is, one, kind of ridiculous, but let's take a look.
Деловая Тюмень стала для страны значимым военно-медицинским центром. В городе было развернуто 15 госпиталей. На движущейся платформе картина Тюменского госпиталя. Колония и медсестры милосердия, в руках которых красные платки, символ пролитой солдатской крови. За вклад в разгром немецко-фашистских захватчиков в годы Великой Отечественной войны в 1986 году Тюмень, город Тюмень награжден орденом Октябрьской революции. Слава подвигам тюменских героев.
I just want everyone to know those aren't even real nurses, by the way. And now we get to Moscow in boy, is there a lot of news in Moscow. So, first of all, there was no flyover over Moscow, St. Petersburg, or Ekaterinburg today because of the weather. And so, here we go. This is straight from RIA News in Russia. So, they're saying, hey, it's canceled. The air show's canceled because of weather. There's the weather over Moscow today. Really, really poor flying conditions, I know. Absolutely terrible. It's partly cloudy skies. What are we going to do? And that's not the only thing. They also celebrated it aboard the ISS. So, here are the Russian cosmonauts there celebrating May the 9th aboard the International Space Station. I mean, they even got the hammer and sickle back there. So, it's fanaticism. I don't know how else to describe it. It is fanaticism right now. That's not the only one. We can continue going down. Bonnie and Clyde apparently also were in support of the Russians, as we see here from this is literally from a concert for May the 9th. See that photo in the background? Yeah, that's a photo of Bonnie and Clyde. You know, the two American gangsters, bank robbers that were gunned down in the 30s. So someone didn't do their homework there. And then we have some fantastic comedy highlights for you today out of the pure fanaticism going on. So we're just going to take a look at this. I hope you guys have a great laugh. I certainly had a great laugh regarding this. So let's take a look. Nothing quite says Siberia like this. Oh, but wait. We saved the best comedy highlight for last. So, I just want you to picture your grandmother. Okay? That's all I want you to do. Think of the sweet things that she's done and giving you cookies and you know, the nice fresh baked smells. And then I want you to watch this video and I want you to just kind of think about what's going on here. Because I have no other way to explain it as of I really don't know what I'm watching when I see this. But this is from today somewhere in Russia. Because who doesn't love their grandmother dancing to dubstep, right? However, all jokes aside, it was supposed to be a big day, and many people were expecting a lot of stuff out of the Kremlin today. There was a lot of talk. They were talking maybe they're going to declare war. Maybe there's going to be an escalation. Maybe there will be general mobilization. Maybe they're going to do this. Maybe they're going to do that. The fact is that they didn't. And I actually am going to pull up the transcript here. I went to the Kremlin website today and pulled this for you guys. This is from the Kremlin. This is their official page. And I'm going to actually read I'm actually going to read his address here so that way you guys can hear without any kind of this is not Google Translate doing this. This is officially what Russia said. This is their translation from their transcripts of his speech. And he says, and Putin's address today said, "Fellow Russian citizens, dear veterans, comrades, soldiers and seamen, sergeants, sergeant majors, midshipmen, and warrant officers, comrade officers, generals, and admirals, I can congratulate you on a day of great victory. The defense of our motherland, when its destiny was at stake, has always been sacred. It was the feeling of true patriotism that Menin and Pozharsky militias stood up for the fatherland. Soldiers went on the offensive in Borodino Field, fought the enemy outside Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev, Minsk, Stalingrad, Kursk, Sevastopol, and Kharkiv. Today, as in the past, you are fighting for our people in the Donbass, for the security of our motherland, for Russia. May 9th, 1945 has been enshrined in the world history forever as the triumph of the United Soviet people, its cohesion and spiritual power, and unparalleled feat on the front lines and on the home front. Victory Day is intimately dear to all of us. There is no family in Russia that was not burnt by the Great Patriotic War. Its memory never fades. On this day, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the heroes march in an endless flow of the immortal regiment. They carry photos of their family members, fallen soldiers, and who remained young forever, and veterans who are already gone. We take pride in the unconquered, courageous generations of the victors. We are proud of being their successors, and it is our duty to preserve the memory of those who defeat Nazism and entrust us with being vigilant and doing everything to thwart the horror of another global war. Therefore, despite all controversies in international relations, Russia has always advocated the establishment of an equal and indivisible security system, which is critically needed for the entire international community. Last December, we proposed signing a treaty on security guarantees. Russia urged the West to hold an honest dialogue in search of meaningful and uncompromising solutions and to take account each other's interests, all in vain. NATO countries did not want to heed us, which means they had totally different plans, and we saw it. Another punitive operation in Donbass, an invasion of our historic lands, including Crimea, was openly in the making. Kiev declared it could attain nuclear weapons. The NATO bloc launched an active military buildup on the territories adjacent to us, thus an absolutely unacceptable threat to us was steadily being created right on our borders, and there was every indication that a clash with neo-Nazis and Banderites backed by the United States and their minions was unavoidable. Let me repeat, we saw the military infrastructure being built up, hundreds of foreign advisors starting work, and regular supplies of cutting-edge weaponry being delivered from NATO countries. The threat grew every day. Russia launched a preemptive strike at the aggression. It was a forced, timely, and the only correct decision. A decision by a sovereign, a strong, and independent country. The United States began claiming that their exceptionalism, particularly after the collapse of the Soviet Union, thus denigrating not only the entire world but also their satellites, who have to pretend not to see anything and to obediently put up with it. But we are a different country. Russia has a different character. We will never give up our love for our motherland, our faith and traditional values, our ancestors' customs, and respect for all peoples and cultures. Meanwhile, the West seems to be set to cancel these millennia-old values. Such moral degradation underlies the cynical falsifications of World War II history, escalating Russophobia, praising traitors, mocking their victims' memories, and crossing out the courage of those who won the victory through suffering. We're aware that U.S. veterans who wanted to come to the parade in Moscow were actually forbidden to do so, but we want them to know we are proud of your deeds and your contributions to our common victory. We honor all soldiers in the Allied armies. The Americans, the English, the French, the resistance fighters, brave soldiers and partisans in China, and all those who defeated Nazism and militarism. Comrades, Donbass militia alongside the Russian army are fighting on their land today, where Princes Sviatoslav and Vladimir Monomak's retainers, soldiers under the command of Rumianetsev and Potmitkin, Suvorov, and Brusilov crushed their enemies, where great patriotic heroes such as Nikolai Vatutin, Sidor Kovpak, and Ludmila Pavlichenko stood to the end. I am addressing our armed forces and the Donbass militia. You are fighting for our motherland, its future, and so that nobody forgets the lessons of World War II, so that there is no place in the world for torturers, death squads, and Nazis. Today, we bow our heads in the sacred memory of those who lost their lives in the Great Patriotic War, and the memories of their sons, daughters, fathers, mothers, grandfathers, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, relatives, and friends. We bow our heads to the memory of the Odessa martyrs who were burned alive in their House of Trade Unions in May of 2014, to the memory of the old people, women, and children in the Donbass who were killed in atrocious and barbaric shelling by neo-Nazis. We bow our heads to the fighting comrades who died a brave death in the righteous battle for Russia. I declare a minute of silence, the minute of silence. The loss of each officer, soldier is painful for all of us, an irretrievable loss for the families and friends. The government, the regional authorities, enterprises, public organizations will do everything to wrap up such families in care and help them. Special support will be given to the children of the killed and wounded comrades in arms. The presidential executive order to this effect was signed today. I wish a speedy recovery to the wounded soldiers and officers and thank doctors, paramedics, nurses, and staff of the military hospitals for their selfless work. Our deepest gratitude goes to you for saving each life, oftentimes sparing no thought for yourselves under shelling on the front lines. Comrades, soldiers and officers from many regions of our enormous motherland, including those who arrived straight from the Donbass, from the combat area, are standing now shoulder to shoulder here on Red Square. We remember how Russia's enemies tried to use international terrorist gangs against us, how they tried to seed inter-ethnic and religious strife so as to weaken us from within and divide us. They completely failed. Today, our warriors of different ethnicities are fighting together, shielding each other from bullets and shrapnel like brothers. This is where the power of Russia lies, our great invincible power of the united multi-ethnic nation. You are defending today what your fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers fought for, the well-being and security of the motherland, who is top priority in life, loyalty, and our fatherland is the main value and reliable foundation of Russia's independence for us, their successors too. Those who crushed Nazism during the Great Patriotic War showed us an example of heroism for all ages. This is the generation of victors, and we will always look up to them. Glory to our heroic armed forces. For Russia, for victory. Hooray. And so that is the official transcript coming from Vladimir Putin and his speech. Long read. I apologize for those that got very bored of listening to me read this, but I think it's very important that we all understand what is being said here. To break this down, and I noticed that there seems to be a couple of things that appear to have been cut from this. And that is a couple of things that I listened to when I actually listened to the transcript. So the thing with his speech is the fact that he claims that we threatened nuclear weapons first. This, of course, is false. He put his military readiness for nuclear weapons up essentially initially as after he declared war, or all but declared war on Ukraine, because they still have not officially declared war. They're still calling it a special military operation. Secondly, he's very openly hostile to any Western country, any Western country. There is no way of committing dialogue when you're calling other nations former allies, might I say, might I add, calling us Nazis and calling us terrorists. I mean, I fought terrorists. I don't think I'm a terrorist. I went and I did things to help people. They are committing war crimes. I gave food to Kurds, to small Kurdish children. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I'm not... he portrays a lot of things in a lot of different lights, but what he doesn't do is he doesn't openly bring into the ideology of escalating the conflict, of really mobilizing. And there's a lot of speculation as to why, and we could speculate all day, but at the end of the day, we also speculated he would declare war, and it was wrong. That's something we've even said here on the channel. Western intelligence agencies really didn't catch it. Everything was lined up to do so. But what you notice is that Ukraine is never really said. Ever. I don't think it's even mentioned a single time in this entire transcript. Cities are named, and the Donbass is named. And that is what is important. The number of times you hear about the Donbass, the number of times you hear about specific locations, and that tells you where the goals are, where their limited objectives are. Because we know that they've limited their objectives. They had to. They could not conduct such a large military endeavor as what they attempted to do. They didn't do the lightning fast, let's hit them hard, shock and awe, take over the country, overthrow the power. They're not doing it the way the U.S. did it in 2003. It's not happening. Because when we did it, we fought Saddam Hussein, and really was just a big army, not really even a good one. And we fought the Taliban, who didn't even have an air force. I mean, we kicked out some essentially third world country dictators. We didn't take on a first world economically backed manufacturing power. We're not talking about two manufacturing powers going to war when the U.S. did it. That's completely opposite. This is first world countries fighting each other. That's a completely different ballgame. That's not a shock and awe. That is a full-fledged war, and that is what we've seen. And we saw it's not gone very well because they underestimated their opponent. They underestimated Ukraine. And now they have to reel with the setbacks because the setbacks are costly. But that doesn't mean that he isn't doing anything with that speech. That speech mentally prepares the people for a longer campaign. It is no longer going to be a quick affair. It is going to be a long one. It is going to accrue more casualties. And that once people start to go missing and more troops have to be called up, which they eventually will because there's a manpower shortage, that the people are going to ask questions. So he has to prepare them now. And whether or not he releases the casualty figures, every casualty is another person whose family is going to have questions and is going to be questioning the cause. But as at least for today, there is a lot of fanaticism inside of Russia. And as we continue, we see that as the ambassador for Poland, or for Russia there in Poland, was on his way to place a memorial, or wreath at a memorial, World War II memorial, red syrup was thrown all over him. Red syrup and paint were thrown all over them, as you can see here. The people are not very they're being called fascists. That is what the chanting is. We all know why they're getting covered in in that red there. It's symbolizing the blood on Russia's hands. So, as we all know, this isn't going very well for Russia in any way. There is nobody, aside from maybe Belarus, that really can back Russia truthfully. But also, during a pro-Soviet rally there in Madrid in Spain, a single Ukrainian protester was there amongst the crowd and was arrested by Spanish police. And we do have the video of that. Policia! Policia! So there she is, a single protester amongst a pro-Soviet crowd. Here comes the police. They grab her. She's refusing to leave, obviously. And so they bring her down and pick her up. So you really have to ask what's going on regarding this, considering everything that's been happening. But Ukraine's not the only one planning on joining the European Union, and that's because Georgia also completed its questionnaire and will be submitting it tomorrow. So we do know that they officially have completed it. And they are ready to also join the European Union. This is coming directly from the government of Georgia. So they're not the only country. There are other countries looking to join the European Union. There are other countries. Of course, we also know Finland and Sweden are currently debating on whether or not they are going to be joining NATO. So everything is gravitating towards back to Western Europe. That sphere of influence, whatever sphere of influence Russia may have had, they burned those bridges. They have burned them. They are not going to be crossing that river again. Russia, unfortunate as it is to say it, the Iron Curtain has really fallen over Europe once again. They've cut themselves off. They are isolated economically, minus natural gas, really. And even then, Europe is currently trying to find alternatives. There are oil embargoes. It's just not. You're cut off economically. You're cut off socially. You're cut off essentially politically, all but politically, and ostracized politically in every country you're in. And any country that deals with you. And the only reason anyone's keeping open dialogue with you is because you won't stop killing people in Ukraine. For those that don't know, we do try to do unbiased news, but we have taken a biased stance on Ukraine. So for those that may be viewing us for the first time, that is why we feel so heavily, because of the independent stuff that we get. Most of the stuff we just can't show here on the stream. And that's just an unfortunate thing, because there's a lot of stuff that unfortunately is very graphic, but also accurately depicts what is actually going on in the world. And we've seen a lot of photos and videos of stuff that after I got out of the military, I thought I'd never see again. And I see it, and much worse than what I went through when I was in the Middle East pales in absolute comparison to what I've seen coming out of the war zones in Ukraine. And I was there when they were bombing places like Aleppo to the ground. So I don't know. I've been to ISIS prisons where you can still see the scratch marks from people being tortured in the walls. And still nothing compares to what's going on in Ukraine. And that's me personally. So I do maintain a very biased opinion when it comes to Ukraine, because I cannot see any way I could morally support anybody regarding this. And in a little bit different news, there in northeastern part of Austria, a train derailed, killing 2 people and injuring an additional 15. The cause of the derailment is not currently known. But as you can see, those cars have officially derailed. Once again, the cause is not known. And that begins to lead us into the Middle East. And there is some interesting stuff coming out of the Middle East. First of all, 11 PKK fighters were killed in the Guri, which is in the western or the eastern part of Turkey. And this is because these resistance fighters have held out in a cave system for the last 80 days. And the Kurdish or the Turkish military has been fighting the PKK in this area for some time, and now they have detonated part of the cave, and that has killed roughly 11 fighters. So it's about a 100-meter long cave. So the PKK is a Kurdish Marxist group, for those that don't know, and they have had a rather bitter history with the Turks, and so there's a lot of tension there. That is one of the things that causes tension between the United States, who, while Turkey views the PKK as a terrorist organization, the United States does not recognize it despite being NATO allies. And that is one of the conflicting reasons why the U.S. had to leave northern Syria and really draw down its troops, because we couldn't have two NATO allies accidentally shooting at each other, causing major international incidents. So we're going to go ahead and mute this. This appears to be some drone footage coming from this region as they are prepping to blow it. And there it goes. So the Turkish Air Force have been conducting airstrikes in this region for some time now, as is, fighting the PKK. And that is going to probably continue. And as we take a look here, 50,000 protesters gathered in Yerevan today, reportedly, and that's something coming from the opposition party. So this would be the largest turnout yet, and this is because Armenia is expected to take sweeping concessions from Azerbaijan as part of their peace negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan to end their current conflict, as the two countries are currently at war. There are still some skirmishes, really less skirmishes, more of Armenia reportedly shooting across the border, and no real casualties, at least according to Azerbaijan. But we do see them here, that huge crowd turnout, and it's not the first. We've seen very large crowds taking part in these protests over the last few weeks. And as we continue, there are several developments here in Iraq today, and the first one actually comes just outside of Baghdad, where a gunman opened fire in Abu Ghraib, specifically the village of Tahus, which is just to the northwest of Baghdad, and that is just outside the city. 6 have reportedly killed, 6 local residents. The gunman has not been identified. And out here, the supposed terrorists were killed in Al-Hadar province in Iraq, and this is because they were apparently hit by an airstrike from a helicopter, and they were 2 shepherds out grazing their I believe it's sheep. So they're out here, their animals were grazing, they're grazing camels, I apologize. So the 2 reported fighters were Faras Ali al-Shamari and Awid al-Shamari, who were both killed. They said that they were part of the terrorist organization, the Islamic State, when this was carried out. And this comes as there's allegations that the government of Iraq is actually targeting Sunni civilians, and just killing them and labeling them Islamic State fighters, which the Islamic State they do follow the Sunni beliefs of Islam, but that doesn't make everyone who follows the Sunni beliefs terrorists. Being Sunni does not make you an Islamic State fighter, and that is the issue. And this is something that is being basically talked about on both sides. And they do give some kind of evidence. Most of these were very graphic in nature. And so this is just one of the pieces of paper that they're claiming this is evidence of them being Islamic State fighters. Now, I have seen some of these insignia, specifically the eye with the teardrops, but this doesn't necessarily mean that they're terrorists. I'm not seeing an Islamic State flag as most Islamic State fighters carry the Islamic State insignia. They carry a small flag in their pocket, or they carry one of those large flags so they can hang it up somewhere, or they wear it as a bandana, or they wear it as for wiping off sweat in their forehead. But I'm not seeing any of that, and I haven't seen any of that. And here is their official report regarding this. So it continues, the frustrations continue in Iraq, and in Dakar, which is a governorate, residents are currently rallied outside of an oil company demanding employment. So there is, with a lot of the unrest and a lot of the stuff going on in Iraq, that doesn't exactly make it a very good political situation or a very good economic situation. And with all of these insecurities, despite the fact that there's literally oil bubbling up from the ground everywhere you go in Iraq, because they have so much oil underneath the sands of Iraq that it is ridiculous, a lot of these are owned by foreign companies, whether that would be Saudi Aramco, whether that would be a Russian oil company or an American oil company, as the joke goes. That it doesn't matter. What they're doing, though, is they're bringing in contractors for a lot of this stuff, and they're using these contractors because they can, they don't have to rely on the civilian population. They can fly them in and out. Generally, they have higher qualifications than some of the general population would be there in Iraq. And so, while the Iraqis are looking for better employment opportunities, the situation just isn't allowing for it very well. So we actually take a look here. So, more unrest there in Iraq. And as we move over into Afghanistan, we can see that the fighting continues in Panjshir. So, the Taliban are announcing that they killed 10 fighters in the National Resistance Front, or the FNS, which is led by Ahmed al-Massoud, who is the junior, I should say, of also Ahmed al-Massoud, who fought the Taliban back in the late 90s, early 2000s, alongside coalition forces. And so this is something that they have been fighting for some time. Ahmed al-Massoud's resistance in the Panjshir is essentially the last place in Afghanistan that is considered not controlled by the Taliban. He is very much gifted, like his father was, in rallying the people behind him and leading a political campaign. He is very well connected, and therefore he is able to fund his own militias and organizations and fight the Taliban and fight their control. He does back coalition forces. He had the entire time, much like his father did. And so this is something they're sending. The Taliban are, however, sending more reinforcements to this area, and they are continuing to fight in this area. Heavy use of artillery, reportedly. We've even seen them use helicopters in this area. using aircraft. So they have kind of a hodgepodge air force that they've put together with some people qualified to fly aircraft, and they have been using them. So, but the fighting is a little bit bitter, and right now those in the Panjshir have a little bit of a home turf advantage, much like Ukraine does in their fight. They have the home turf advantage. They know the land better than the Taliban do necessarily, because a lot of these fighters aren't from these regions. In fact, the first time that most of them had ever been in Kabul is when Kabul had fallen, let alone other parts of the country. And as we move further south, we can take a look here in Panipat, which is in India, and there was a leopard that was frightened there in Panipat. It actually ended up not severely injuring some of the police officers there that were trying to capture it. However, everyone is, for all intents and purposes, minus a few bumps and scrapes, safe, including the leopard. The leopard was successfully detained. So we do have a video of that. So I would not be okay if a leopard was jumping on me like that whatsoever. I would be terrified for my life. That is a big cat. And I like cats. They have very, very, very dangerous murder mittens. So, no, thank you. They can have the leopard. In Sri Lanka, violence is escalating. So this comes amidst it's the worst economic crisis that the country has seen since it became an independent country. But there have been wide-scale protests, and it just isn't going very well. And today, 5 people were killed, among them one of the members of parliament in Sri Lanka. So there are currently, saying, hey, there's a state of emergency. There's a lot going on here, but there are protests, there are food insecurities, medication is running out, food is running out, water is running out, fuel is running out. They are in constant blackouts because they don't have enough fuel to actually support any of their energy infrastructure. This is something that is being sent to them by India as part of aid packages being sent to them. But there is just a lot going on in Sri Lanka. However, a lot of social media has been cut off. And therefore, so a lot of that is being cut off, and therefore a lot of this stuff is unfortunately not getting out to us except in very small snippets.
Watching with absolute disgust at the way these goons are behaving. Some of them even try to go into Crescat. Now they are walking towards Gotagogama. Now it's clearly evident why the president put this godforsaken emergency law. I'm asking the Sri Lankan police in simple English, what the FI all doing? When there are inter-union student federation people protesting, you all bloody treat them with tear gas. When there are SJB people, you all treat them with tear gas. When there are JBP people, you treat them with tear gas. So what the Royal FI all doing?
He's understandably upset. In case you're ever at a event there, that is a very easy way to knock out tear gas. Depending on what event you're going to, please don't go and purposely create violence. But here, in Doshan, which is in China, the sky turned red. And it's not one of those, oh, it's a very pretty sky of the reds, the oranges, the purples. No, red. like scary kind of red, and no one knows why. Take a look. I don't know about you, but just watching that makes me sit here and think, like, I'm just waiting for the round 1 symbol to start popping up on your screen from Call of Duty Zombies. Because that is, I would be terrified if I went outside and I saw that. That would be terrifying, because you have to wonder what causes something like that. And the fact that no one knows is slightly concerning. But it's interesting, and it's kind of cool. It would be cool to see, but I would be terrified personally. Just that's Mother Nature. It's showing you a bad side of things, and I don't want to know what's causing it. I just don't want it to happen again. However, in a less fortunate news, or less interesting news, I should say, well, equally interesting, just a little bit more somber, I guess. 50 more people were killed in Ituri, and several are missing. And this comes after what is suspected to be the Codeco militants who conducted a similar massacre earlier in February, maybe behind the attack. There's an illegal gold mine here, and they were armed with machetes, and they went into the settlement and targeted this gold mine. A baby was a victim of this massacre. They really didn't spare a whole lot of people. But the actual identity of the group is still unknown at this point. That is just suspected to be that Codeco group. So unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of information on what's going down in Ituri. That's in the DRC, or the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And a couple of different updates out of Washington today. First of all, President Biden signed the Lend-Lease Act into law today. So this will streamline the aid going to Ukraine to an unprecedented level. And what I mean unprecedented, I mean a level of lethal supply in aid streamlined in a very similar fashion to that of World War II. This is the first time since World War II that the Lend-Lease Act has ever been put in place. And this is going to change how the relations between Ukraine and America work in getting that lethal aid there. That means that Ukraine has the ability to pull from reserves in the United States. They have the ability to pull from stockpiles in the United States. Not just the additionals. This is what we need. Raytheon reportedly is operating at twice what their normal capacity is, producing Javelins right now, because they are that effective and they are that much needed. There's already procurement talks in order to maintain that minimum standard for the U.S. stockpiles for the U.S. forces. They maintain a minimum of this is what we need in order for America to be safe and for our military to operate in whatever it needs to do. And they maintain a stockpile. However, there are concerns that some things are running in short supply, certain parts, and there are certain things such as the Stinger, which at this point Raytheon has suggested may even need to be remodeled in order to include either replacement parts or a lack of certain parts necessary currently in its current configuration. And this is coming from Ilya Ponomarenko. This is something that's been pretty highly reported on as well. But there are other various agencies in DC also giving updates and statements and reports. So first of all, we have a statement regarding the press conference there at the White House regarding the G7 statement, and this is what the leaders had to say. We will spare no effort to hold President Putin and architects and accomplices of this aggression, including Lukashenko, the Lukashenko regime in Belarus, accountable for their actions in accordance with international law. And how that's going to go, we don't know. There is still technically the possibility you could arrest them, but it's a very slim likelihood. We would essentially have to beat Russia in a full military conflict, conventional conflict, saying we don't all turn ourselves to ash in the process, and eventually arrest him, saying he isn't killed off by his own populace before then. That's not the only thing Reuters here is reporting regarding the statements made by the spokesman for the Pentagon, John Kirby, former Admiral Kirby, and talking about moving Ukrainians into camps in Russia. So Ukrainians are being sent to Russia against their will. They're being put into filtration camps. The Pentagon is now saying this is indeed a thing. So let's take a listen here. This is John Kirby, the spokesman of the Pentagon.
We certainly have seen indications that Ukrainians are being moved from Ukraine into Russia. I can't speak to how many camps or what they look like. I mean, I don't know that we have that level of detail, but we do have indications that Ukrainians are being taken against their will into Russia. Again, unconscionable, not the behavior of responsible power. Certainly another indication that he simply won't accept and respect Ukrainian sovereignty and that they are citizens of another nation. Again, you don't have to look very far to see evidence of Russian brutality here continued. We're on day 75, which means 75 days of brutalizing the nation of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. And every time you think they just can't fall to a new low, they prove you wrong.
I don't think I could have put that any better. Every time you just can't think that they can't fall to a new low, they prove you wrong. That is amazingly quotable words for John Kirby. Very good spokesperson. If you ever have the chance to listen to some of what he says regarding the Pentagon, it is some very good and very interesting information. He's very smart about how he discloses things. So I do listen to his official statements and the stuff when he's actually doing them. I watch them live whenever I can, and I watch the reruns. So very good information, very good source. And then coming to us here, this is coming from the Secretary of State. This is coming from the State Department regarding the concerns that Russia may be attempting to falsely annex different parts of eastern Ukraine, including places such as anywhere in Donetsk, Luhansk, even Kherson. So there's a lot of concern regarding that. There's been talk of the Kherson referendum, and there seems to be a lot more talk going forward. It was something that could have been announced today, as we read, and as I read there today, it did not occur, of course. So when that occurs, if it occurs, we will see. And finally, to wrap up the night, we actually jump back over into the Middle East. And that's because here, just off the coast of the UAE, here in what's called the Gaka Islands, and this is where archaeologists have discovered the oldest structures ever in the United Arab Emirates. So these buildings are roughly 8,500 years old, according to some of their dating that they have. The site was the burial of a person at the site at least 5,000 years ago. They don't know how long it was inhabited, but this is roughly 500 years older than any settlement found thus far. So it's a very rare find. It's something that could have great historical significance for just civilization in this part of the world, in this region. We do know, of course, Mesopotamia, right there, right about where Baghdad is, and of course ancient Egypt. But there is a lot of history in this part of the world that isn't discovered. In fact, there's a lot of areas in the world that there are only people we know about because of things such as the Romans, who talked about these people. We only know of some civilizations just because there isn't any remnants left. We can't find any remnants left. And to find stuff like this is very rare, and it adds a lot of knowledge into our little knowledge bank and where we've come from. It's very cool. So we have different illustrations regarding the structure here. So that is the stone structure there. It's not a lot. Of course, we can see some arrowheads here. So there's not exactly necessarily a lot regarding this. A lot of this stuff isn't stuff that we find. It's not like we find an entire city and we can know everything. We find, you know, mummified bedspreads and that. No, it's usually just a bunch of rocks that if you're walking down the beach, you're like, huh, that's kind of weird. To an archaeologist, that may be not weird. That may be a very significant find. So it's very cool that they found that, and I hope that they continue to be able to go there and investigate that site and learn more and be able to share some more knowledge as to the culture and what kind of people lived there 5,000, 8,500 years ago. And with that, that wraps up all of the news for today. It was a lot. There's a lot regarding May the 9th. A lot regarding May the 9th. And no, it was the big topic. This is the day we've all been waiting for to see what is Russia going to do next. And it was kind of a disappointing day in that regards. Really, everyone talked about it and really brought it up, and everyone was like, oh, he's going to declare war. No, he's going to do this. And in fact, he didn't. It was very much, we very much overestimated what he was going to do there. But that is okay. The Russians continue to keep us guessing, and we don't know what they're going to do next. He may not declare war today. He could do it tomorrow. He could do it as I'm talking, and I'm not knowing about it right now, for all we know. But the question is up in the air. There's been a lot of questions about, well, nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And that's something I kind of wanted to address. I was kind of thinking about it. And I think there's something hopeful to bring up in that conversation. A lot of people are scared right now because of that prospect, and I don't think it's going to happen from personal experience. For instance, Iran would like nothing more than to kill Americans, except for one thing. The Ayatollah would like one thing more than to kill Americans, and that is he likes power. If he doesn't have a country anymore, which is what would happen if Iran killed any Americans directly, then he wouldn't have a country anymore. He'd be overthrown and kicked out of power by an invasion. If Putin used a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine, his country gets glassed. And that's not... He doesn't have a country to rule anymore. He doesn't have any power. So, in the one very big hopeful thing is that is going to refrain people from using nuclear weapons and to calm a bunch of those fears is the fact that he likes power more than he likes anything else. And if he uses a nuclear weapon, he doesn't have any power. And while the chance is still there, I don't think it's very big. So to calm some of those fears that you've heard about and that you may be concerned about, don't worry about it too much. There's a lot of other things that could happen, and I don't think nuclear weapons is going to be the big one. And so with that addressed, be sure to check out the links in the description below. Take a look at the different organizations that we have down there. There's a lot of stuff for Ukraine, including the one from the Ukrainian government, United 24. That is at the top of the list there. But there's also other places in the world that could use your help. Ethiopia and Somalia, children specifically under the ages of 5 are affected in those areas. And there are millions of them who could really use your help. Lots of malnutrition and water insecurities at this point. 90% of the Tigray region in Ethiopia requires humanitarian assistance just to survive. And then also Southeast Asia, we can't forget that they are still in the recovery phase, and that will take a very long time. A super typhoon did hit them there in the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and they are still in that recovery effort. So many people need your help there. So please, if you can't give a lot, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, give us a like and subscribe. We want to be able to reach more people, and we want to be able to have larger fundraisers here, raise more money for people in need. And when we are large enough to be able to do so, we want to be able to put that just directly onto the streams and not just in the video description. But also join us on our Discord. There's a lot of interesting stuff on there. There's a lot of interesting discussions. We have it not just for Ukraine, but other parts of the world if you want to get into those discussions, such as, of course, you can have discussions regarding the conflict in Ukraine, cartel activity there in South America, stuff going on in Africa with the Islamic State, the Middle East, of course, the conflicts happening there, or what's going on with the lockdowns there in China. There's something for you all. And there's also a lot of updates that get put on there regularly by different community members. So check us out, and we'll be happy to have you. Rack my brain a little bit. I have some interesting, useless knowledge that isn't good for anything else but this stream and your questions. So go ahead and ask away, and if I can't answer it, I'm sure someone there can. And with that, I hope you guys have a great day. Have a wonderful Tuesday. We will see you tomorrow. Hope you remain safe, your family and your friends remain safe. Have a great night, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.